Beloved, today is not just another day on the calendar. Today, Thursday, February 26, 2026, is a divine appointment, a day when the heavens are ready to open and release unexpected favor and supernatural help into your life. I declare that as you join me in this sacred moment, the barriers that have held you back are being removed, and doors that were closed will swing wide open. Some of you have been waiting, praying, and hoping, wondering when breakthrough will come. Let me tell you today, your breakthrough is closer than you think. The Spirit of the Lord is aligning divine connections, supernatural resources, and divine favor on your behalf. And all you need to do is position yourself in faith to receive it. I want you to know, beloved, that favor doesn't always come in ways we expect. Sometimes it comes through people you never imagined, situations that look impossible, or doors that seem hidden. But when God moves, the impossible bows, and the ordinary becomes extraordinary. As we pray together today, declare with me that you are ready to receive the unexpected. Declare that you are open to divine intervention. And as you engage with this message, I want you to participate actively. Like this video, subscribe to the channel for daily prayer, write amen in the comments, and also comment one thing you are believing God for today. Prepare your heart, stretch your faith, and lift your voice, because today supernatural help is coming. Today, unexpected favor is being released, and today, your life will testify to the miraculous power of God. Let us begin. Beloved, as we gather in this sacred moment, I want you to open your heart to the profound truth that divine favor does not always arrive in the ways that our human minds anticipate. It does not always come on the timetable we desire, and it does not always present itself in forms that we recognize immediately. The favor of God, beloved, is a mysterious and glorious force, one that transcends human logic, expectation, and limitation. It moves quietly, sometimes invisibly behind the scenes, orchestrating circumstances and aligning situations, so that doors open, blessings multiply, and lives are transformed in ways that surpass comprehension. The favor of God is not bound by your understanding. It is not constrained by the familiar patterns of your daily existence. It often arrives in ways that startle the senses, provoke awe, and awaken within you a sense of wonder, as if the heavens themselves are bending low to pour out blessings that are beyond calculation. Consider for a moment the stories in Scripture where God's favor manifested in ways that were completely unexpected. Joseph, a young man betrayed by his brothers, thrown into a pit and later sold into slavery, never imagined that the chains of hardship would become the very instruments of his elevation. In Egypt, a place foreign to him, surrounded by people who neither knew him nor understood his potential, God's favor moved invisibly. What appeared to be a season of suffering was in reality a preparation for divine promotion. The very thing that seemed like an obstacle was the channel through which favor flowed. Beloved, your current trials may very well be the unseen channels through which God is preparing to release supernatural favor into your life. You may not see it now, but God is moving. He is orchestrating. He is aligning. He is working behind the veil to set in motion events that will surprise you, delight you, and position you for a level of favor that exceeds your current imagination. It is vital for you to understand that divine favor is not always predictable. Sometimes it comes through people who seem unrelated to your journey, through opportunities that appear to be coincidences, and through doors that are hidden from your immediate perception. The moment you begin to measure favor by human expectation, by what you think should happen, or by the way circumstances look to your eyes, you limit the extraordinary movement of God. Divine favor is like the wind. It cannot be contained, it cannot be measured, and it cannot be tamed. It comes from places you do not anticipate, often through sources you would not think to consider. Sometimes, beloved, the very situations that feel like setbacks, the circumstances that appear like delays, or the experiences that seem like detours are in fact the conduits of divine favor. They are the hidden highways upon which God is sending blessings that will astonish your heart. I want to encourage you to release the need to control every detail of how your blessing will manifest. Let go of the insistence that favor must arrive in a familiar form through familiar people or at a familiar time. Divine favor operates on a higher plane, a frequency that surpasses human calculation. When God's favor enters your life, it can look completely different from what you imagined. Perhaps it will come as a conversation with a stranger that changes the trajectory of your career. Perhaps it will arrive as a letter, an email, a call, or an introduction you never expected. Perhaps it will appear as a sudden opportunity in your personal life, or as the resolution of a long-standing challenge in a way that feels miraculous. You cannot anticipate every form it may take, and the moment you begin to anticipate, you may miss the subtle, quiet, and unexpected movement of God's hand. There is also a principle that the favor of God often surpasses human merit. You do not earn favor simply by your efforts, your education, or your skill. Divine favor is not transactional. It is relational. It is the overflow of God's goodness and his intentional desire to elevate, bless, and position you for your destiny. Sometimes, beloved, favor will come when you least expect it, and through means you least deserve, simply because God has chosen to pour out his goodness upon you. It is the manifestation of his love, mercy, and grace. Consider Mary, the mother of Jesus, a young girl chosen to carry the Messiah. She did not earn her calling in human terms. She did not achieve it through worldly achievement. Yet God's favor positioned her for a role so extraordinary that it altered the course of human history. Favor often arrives in ways that are not earned, but are divinely appointed. The path to recognizing and receiving unexpected favor requires a heart of attentiveness and spiritual awareness. You must cultivate sensitivity to the ways God moves. You must listen for the subtle nudges of the Spirit. You must open your eyes to the coincidences that are not coincidences, to the doors that seem closed but are in reality slightly ajar, to the moments that appear ordinary but are charged with divine potential. Many times people miss their favor because they are looking for it in the wrong places, or they're insisting that it arrive according to their timetable. Beloved, learn to expect the unexpected. Train your spirit to recognize the fingerprints of God in every situation. Train your mind to see beyond the obvious. Favor may come disguised as a problem, a challenge, or a person you thought was irrelevant. Learn to discern the hidden blessings in what seems to be ordinary circumstances. There is also an element of preparation that must be understood. Often divine favor waits until you are positioned to receive it. Just as a seed must be planted in fertile soil to produce a harvest, your life must be prepared to receive the full measure of God's blessing. Patience is required. Faith is required. And obedience is required. Do not despise the waiting season. Do not discount the period of preparation. Many people see delay as denial, but delay is often the divine design that ensures you are ready for the magnitude of favor that is coming. Joseph's years in the pit, the prison, and the palace were all preparation for the time when God's favor would manifest in a way that surpassed all expectation. You too must recognize that every season, even those that appear frustrating, is fertile ground for favor to take root. Let me also remind you, beloved, that favor often requires courage to step into the unknown. When God opens doors that you did not plan for, when opportunities arrive in forms you cannot predict, fear is often the first enemy that seeks to block you. The human mind resists what it cannot control or explain, but favor is not governed by fear or familiarity. It is governed by faith and obedience. When God whispers go, or circumstances shift in a way that beckons you forward, step boldly. The favor that awaits you may require that you leave comfort behind, that you step into uncertainty, and that you trust in the invisible hand that guides your destiny. It is in the courageous steps toward the unknown that favor begins to accelerate. Another vital truth to understand is that unexpected favor is relational as well as spiritual. It often comes through people, connections, or alliances that you would not have orchestrated yourself. Someone may enter your life today who will catalyze your breakthrough. Someone may provide insight, mentorship, resources, or encouragement that you did not anticipate. Be attentive to these divine appointments. Treat every encounter, every conversation, every introduction as potentially loaded with the seed of supernatural favor. Recognize that favor is not always instantaneous. Sometimes it manifests subtly at first, then grows exponentially as you nurture it through faith, discernment, and action. Favor also challenges the ordinary. It often interrupts the normal flow of life. You may be going about your routine, feeling stuck or stagnant, when suddenly God intervenes. It may appear as a sudden promotion, a new business opportunity, a healing, a reconciliation, a financial breakthrough, or a spiritual awakening. These moments are meant to remind you that God's favor is active, alive, and constantly moving. It is a force that defies limitations, shatters expectations, and rewrites stories. The key is to remain alert, to stay prayerful, and to recognize that the ordinary is never devoid of divine possibility. Beloved, as you meditate on this truth, I want you to internalize the reality that favor is not dependent on circumstance. Favor can manifest in the middle of storms, in the midst of trials, and in seasons of uncertainty. Just as the sun shines behind clouds, God's favor is always working, even when you cannot see it. Do not grow weary. Do not become discouraged. Do not resign yourself to human limitation. Divine favor is patient, it is persistent, and it is powerful. It works invisibly, quietly, and mysteriously until the perfect moment of manifestation. It is important to also understand that your expectation shapes your ability to receive favor. When you enter a place of faith-filled anticipation, when you declare that you are ready to receive, when you align your heart with God's promises, the atmosphere is set for favor to flow. Favor gravitates toward the expectant, the hopeful, and the spiritually attentive. Expect the unexpected. Speak as if it is already on its way. Move as though you have already received it. The moment you position yourself in faith, the favor that God has been preparing begins to accelerate toward you. Let this be a moment of reflection and awareness. Consider the ways God has already moved in your life, sometimes in subtle ways that you overlooked. Perhaps a kind word, a timely phone call, a door that opened unexpectedly, or a blessing that arrived through a person or circumstance you never planned for. These are testimonies of divine favor. They are evidence that God's hand is at work, that his favor is constant, and that his goodness knows no bounds. Recognize these moments. Celebrate them. Allow them to build your faith for what is coming next. Beloved, I want you to understand something deeply today. Supernatural help is always available, but it requires positioning. It requires a heart that is willing to trust beyond what the eyes can see, to believe beyond what the circumstances suggest, and to act in alignment with the principles of faith. The moment we begin to understand that God's help is not distant, that it is not conditional on human perfection, and that it is constantly accessible to those who are willing to position themselves for it, everything changes. Supernatural help is not something that comes as a random gift. It is a deliberate response from heaven to a life that chooses to align with the purposes of God. It moves in response to expectation, obedience, and the posture of faith that says, Lord, I am ready, I am open, I am prepared to receive. Consider the story of Elijah at the brook. Here was a man of God in a season of isolation, in a time of despair for the nation around him. Yet God's help was immediate and supernatural. Ravens brought him sustenance, water flowed in the midst of drought, and the provision of God met him exactly where he was. But notice this. Elijah's positioning mattered. He moved to the brook. He trusted the invisible hand of God to provide. His faith aligned with the supernatural provision. Beloved, this is the principle. When faith positions itself, when obedience and expectation meet, God's help moves swiftly and powerfully. It is not random. It is relational and responsive. You may have been waiting for help, crying out in your prayers, wondering if anyone is listening or if God will intervene. Let me remind you that the waiting season is often the time of preparation for the supernatural intervention that is on its way. You see, help comes most powerfully when you have cultivated a readiness to receive it. Faith is the key that unlocks doors to supernatural provision. When you position yourself in a space of trust, when your heart is aligned with God's promises, and when your mind is free from doubt, heaven is ready to act on your behalf. It is not enough to simply hope or wish for help. You must actively position yourself through prayer, expectancy, and surrender to receive it. Let us also recognize that supernatural help often defies human logic. It does not always come in ways that make sense to our finite understanding. Sometimes it will appear as a solution that seems unconventional, as an opportunity that seems unlikely, or as intervention through people, places, or circumstances you never anticipated. Faith is the vehicle that allows us to see beyond the natural and to receive the supernatural. Without faith, help remains dormant, unseen, or ignored. But with faith, the invisible becomes visible, the impossible becomes possible, and the ordinary transforms into the extraordinary. Your willingness to trust, to step forward, even when you cannot see the entire path, activates the very help that heaven has prepared. Think about Daniel in the lion's den. Here was a young man whose faith positioned him perfectly, despite the threats and the decrees of men. His obedience, his unwavering trust, and his commitment to God positioned him in such a way that supernatural protection arrived instantly. The lions, who represented danger, opposition, and potential destruction, were powerless against the divine intervention of God. Daniel's positioning mattered. Faith is not passive. Faith is not mere intellectual agreement. Faith is action, alignment, and positioning in a way that says, God, I trust you even when the outcome is uncertain, and I am ready for your help to manifest in every area of my life. I want you to hear this. Supernatural help is not limited by human capacity. It is not limited by the size of your problems, the strength of your enemies, or the scarcity of resources. When faith positions itself, it opens a channel for divine resources to flow freely. The multiplication of bread and fish in the wilderness, the calming of the storm, the healing of the sick. These are all testimonies of supernatural help flowing in response to faith. The moment you step into alignment with God's word, declare his promises, and move in obedience, you are activating the very forces of heaven that are ready to work on your behalf. There is no obstacle too great, no situation too entrenched, and no limitation too strong to resist the power of supernatural help when your faith is in position. Beloved, this principle also applies to our personal lives today. You may be facing financial pressure, relational challenges, health concerns, or spiritual battles. You may feel weary, overwhelmed, or even hopeless. But I declare to you that supernatural help is closer than you think. It is already on the move, waiting for you to align yourself through faith. Prayer, expectation, and obedience are the positioning acts that unlock God's intervention. It is not enough to ask for help without positioning yourself to receive it. You must create the spiritual, emotional, and mental space where God's assistance can manifest. Let us also consider the element of persistence in positioning for supernatural help. Faith is not a one-time act. It is a continuous posture. The widow who persistently sought justice, the man who refused to give up on his son, the disciples who continued to ask, seek, and knock. These are examples of consistent faith that positions one to receive help. Persistence is a form of alignment. It signals to heaven that you are serious, that you are ready, and that you will not be deterred by delay or difficulty. Supernatural help responds to perseverance, to steadfastness, and to hearts that refuse to relent, even when circumstances seem contrary. You must also understand that positioning for supernatural help often requires humility and surrender. God's help is not always delivered in ways that serve our ego or satisfy our human pride. Sometimes it comes wrapped in humility, disguised as small beginnings, or through the actions of others. The posture of humility opens the heart to receive help without resistance. When we acknowledge that we cannot do it alone, when we surrender control, and when we say, Lord, I need you, we position ourselves perfectly for divine intervention. Supernatural help flows most powerfully through hearts that recognize the dependence on God and their willingness to yield to his wisdom. Another critical aspect is expectation. Faith positions itself through the lens of expectation. When you actively expect God's help, when you believe that he is able and willing to intervene, you are co-laboring with heaven. Expectation is a spiritual magnet. It draws the resources, strategies, and people necessary to bring the help you need. Without expectation, many blessings pass by unnoticed. But when your heart is expectant, your eyes are open, and your spirit is alert, you begin to recognize the signs of supernatural intervention. Opportunities appear, solutions emerge, and doors open precisely because your faith positions you to receive them. Supernatural help also requires a willingness to act. Positioning does not mean passive waiting. It means aligning your actions with God's direction, stepping into opportunities, and moving in the courage that faith demands. When God provides, he often does so through your willingness to act on what he has revealed. The Israelites crossing the Red Sea, the healing of the paralytic, lower through the roof, the feeding of the multitude, all required human participation in order for divine power to manifest. Faith positions itself not only in prayer and expectation, but also in obedience and action. Beloved, you must also recognize that supernatural help is relational. It often flows through people whom God sends into your life. Mentors, allies, friends, and even strangers may become vessels of divine provision because your faith has positioned you to receive through them. Be attentive, recognize the opportunities, respond in obedience and gratitude. Your positioning in faith opens you to receive through channels you may never have imagined. Sometimes the help comes as a word, a touch, a gesture, or an introduction, but it always arrives because your faith has aligned you with the supernatural. Let me remind you that supernatural help is not limited by timing. God's timing is perfect, and it is often unconventional. Your position in faith ensures that when the moment arrives, you are ready to receive. Joseph in Egypt waited years before his dream was fulfilled. The blind man at the pool waited for the stirring of the water. Faith positions you not only for immediate intervention, but also for the perfect timing of God's orchestration. Trust the process, remain aligned, stay in faith, because the help you are waiting for will arrive in its appointed season. There is also a spiritual discipline in positioning. Prayer, meditation, worship, and confession of God's promises are all forms of alignment. They prepare the soul to receive, quiet the mind to perceive, and strengthen the spirit to endure until help manifests. The more disciplined your faith, the more prepared your life is to experience the fullness of supernatural intervention. Positioning through spiritual discipline is a proactive approach to receiving the help that heaven desires to provide. Beloved, as you reflect on this truth, I want you to internalize that positioning for supernatural help is not about human effort alone. It is about aligning with God's principles, trusting his timing, obeying his direction, and maintaining an expectant heart. It is about recognizing that help is always available, that heaven is never idle, and that when your faith is positioned correctly, the supernatural moves in your favor. You may not see it immediately, but rest assured, every prayer, every act of obedience, every step of faith is a signal to heaven that you are ready for divine intervention. Positioning also includes the way we receive. Sometimes supernatural help comes gently, quietly, and without fanfare. It may arrive in forms that are subtle, requiring discernment to recognize a word of encouragement, a solution to a long-standing problem, or a door opening through a new relationship may all be manifestations of the supernatural. Faith positions you to notice, to embrace, and to act upon these moments. Without faith, the help is often overlooked, ignored, or rejected. Persistence, humility, expectation, action, and attentiveness. These are all elements of positioning that allow the supernatural to flow freely. Beloved, the help you are seeking is available now. The forces of heaven are ready to move. The moment you align your heart, position your faith, and prepare your spirit, supernatural intervention is activated. There is nothing too difficult, too delayed, or too complicated for God when your faith is in position. Beloved, I want you to hear this deeply today. Breakthrough is closer than it appears. I know that some of you may feel like you have been waiting for a long time. You may be standing in the midst of challenges, obstacles, and seasons of delay, and the weight of uncertainty may feel heavy upon you. You may be asking yourself, will it ever come? Is it really on the way? Am I moving in the right direction? I want you to pause for a moment and consider this. What if the breakthrough you have been longing for is just around the corner? What if it is closer than your eyes can see, closer than your circumstances suggest, and closer than your own doubt allows you to believe? Sometimes the miracle is already moving, already working behind the scenes, but it has not yet manifested in a way that your human senses can detect. Let me ask you something. How long have you been hoping for change in your life? How long have you been praying, interceding, or believing for the impossible? Take a moment and really reflect. I want you to write your answer in the comments below because this is an important step toward recognizing that your breakthrough is personal and unique. When you verbalize it, when you acknowledge it, you position yourself to receive. The act of declaring the length of your wait is an act of faith because it demonstrates your awareness that you have been faithful even when the results are delayed. Breakthrough is often closer than it appears because God's timing is not our timing. The human mind tends to measure progress linearly, day by day, month by month, step by step. But God operates outside of time. He sees the beginning and the end simultaneously. He is aware of every detail, every factor, and every possibility that you cannot yet perceive. Beloved, this means that even if you cannot see the breakthrough today, it is already on its way. It is already being orchestrated in ways that exceed your understanding. The moment you begin to grasp this principle, the weight of delay begins to lift. You begin to understand that God is never late, that he is never inattentive, and that his plan for you is always unfolding perfectly, even when you cannot see it. Have you ever considered that the obstacles you face may be signals that your breakthrough is imminent? Often God allows challenges, tests, and trials as a way of preparing you for the magnitude of the victory that is coming. These obstacles are not indicators of defeat. They are proof that something significant is about to manifest. Consider the story of the Israelites at the Red Sea. They were trapped, surrounded, and seemingly without hope, yet their breakthrough was closer than they could imagine. The waters parted. The impossible became possible. But it required faith, patience, and attentiveness to the movement of God. I want to ask you, What obstacles in your life today might be pointing to a breakthrough that is just ahead? Take a moment, reflect, and write it in the comments. This is your chance to acknowledge your waiting and to declare that you believe God is moving. Breakthrough is also closer than it appears because it often comes in ways that are unexpected. We tend to anticipate that change will happen in the form we imagine, but God rarely works according to our human blueprint. Sometimes what you perceive as a setback is actually the vehicle through which your breakthrough will arrive. Sometimes doors that seem closed are actually the channels that are preparing to open wider than you could have ever dreamed. Sometimes people or circumstances that appear to be obstacles are actually divine instruments positioning you for victory. The key is to remain alert, to trust, and to recognize the signs of God's hand at work. When you do, you will begin to see that the breakthrough is much nearer than your eyes once suggested. I want to remind you that breakthrough often requires persistence. It requires a refusal to give up, a determination to remain faithful, and a commitment to continue believing even when the situation seems stagnant. Some breakthroughs take time because they are designed to cultivate patience, perseverance, and strength in your life. These seasons are not wasted. They are formative. They are shaping you, preparing you, and building within you the resilience necessary to sustain the blessing when it arrives. Breakthrough is not only about the moment of victory, it is also about the process that produces within you a readiness to receive and steward it faithfully. Beloved, there is a spiritual principle here that is critical to understand. The breakthrough that seems distant is often closer than you realize because it is being aligned with your faith. Faith is the lens through which we see the unseen. Faith positions us to recognize the opportunities that others overlook. Faith allows us to move forward confidently even when the path is not fully clear. It is the spiritual posture that aligns your heart with God's timing, and it is the key that unlocks doors that appear locked. The breakthrough you are praying for, the miracle you are longing to see is approaching, but your faith must be active to receive it fully. Let me ask you another question. Are you believing God for a breakthrough today, right now in this season of your life? Take a moment and declare it in the comments below. Write it out. Speak it boldly. By doing so, you are not only acknowledging your desire for God's intervention, but you are also exercising your faith in alignment with His divine timing. Every declaration, every expression of expectation is a spiritual act that positions you for manifestation. Breakthrough is often hidden in the ordinary. It may not announce itself with fanfare, and it may not arrive exactly the way you envisioned. But God's timing and methods are always perfect. Sometimes breakthrough begins as a subtle shift, a change in perspective, an answer to a prayer you had forgotten, or a door that opens quietly. You may not notice it immediately, but if you are attentive, if you are prayerful, and if you are persistent, you will recognize the moment when your breakthrough begins to manifest. Beloved, the ordinary is never devoid of divine possibility. Sometimes the greatest victories begin quietly, and by the time they become visible, they are overwhelming in their power and impact. Consider the principle of alignment. Your breakthrough is often closer than it appears because it is already aligned with the purposes of God. The resources, the people, the timing, and the circumstances are already in motion. You may not see the full picture, but it is being orchestrated with divine precision. All you need to do is maintain your faith, continue in prayer, and remain obedient to the promptings of the Spirit. The more aligned you are with God's will, the easier it becomes to recognize and step into the breakthrough when it arrives. Breakthrough is also about perspective. Sometimes it appears distant simply because our vision is limited. Human eyes see only what is immediately in front of them, but God's eyes see the entire tapestry of your life. He sees the threads of preparation, the invisible connections and the moments of divine intervention that are already in motion. When you trust that God is working behind the scenes, even when you cannot see it, you begin to perceive the closeness of your breakthrough. It is not a question of if it will come, it is a question of when. And the when is often much nearer than you imagine. I want to ask you another question. What has caused you to doubt that your breakthrough is near? Take a moment to reflect. Write it in the comments. By confronting these doubts and speaking them aloud, you allow the power of faith to address them directly. Doubt has no authority over what God has already set in motion. When you declare your belief, when you name your expectation, you position yourself for the manifestation of that which is already on the way. Sometimes breakthrough requires a willingness to let go of what no longer serves you. Just as a seed must fall into the soil to produce fruit, old habits, past hurts, and limiting beliefs must give way to the new season that God is preparing. If you are holding tight